Anakin Skywalker, a 9-year-old boy, lives with his mother Shmi on Tatooine. They are both slaves and live a rough life. Little Anakin's life only gets worse when his mother Shmi dies at the hands of scavengers. The scavengers robbed the shop where Shmi worked and killed her in the process. However, to the shop owner's luck, Bo-Katan Kryze and her father, Adonai, were on the planet, looking for specialized weaponry. They managed to stop the scavengers, but it was too late for Shmi. Due to their customs, they took Shmi's body back to her home to find little Anakin. They asked the boy about his family, who told them he had none. They look at each other and nod. They offer for Anakin to come and live with them on Mandalore. This is the beginning of Anakin's journey as a foundling. He was brought into and welcomed into the Kryze family. This is before Bo-Katan joined the Death Watch. Anakin was happy. He was welcomed into a loving family, but still misses his mother. The pain of her death will haunt him for a long time. Being a Mandalorian, Anakin begins training in combat. He got on specifically well with Bo-Katan, who had an affiliation for violence. He trains for 6 years, learning the ways of Mandalorian warriors. Anakin took keenly to his learning, advancing faster in his training than was thought possible. One day in a training duel, Bo-Katan was beating Anakin, her skills far superior to a 16-year-old boy. However, Bo-Katan lunges to deliver the final strike, and in desperation, Anakin grabs her with the Force and throws her against the back wall. Anakin looks at his hands, in awe at what he had done. Bo-Katan rushed over to him and asked how he did it, but then it clicks in her mind. He must be Force sensitive. He must have the power of a Jedi. Anakin is the first Force sensitive Mandalorian since the first Tar Vizsla, wielder of the Darksaber. Bo-Katan rushes to tell her brother and Satine. Satine was the leader of the New Mandalorians, a pacifist movement which disliked the violent nature of Mandalore's history. She always disliked Anakin and her sister training in combat, but ultimately could not stop it. But this revelation that Anakin is Force sensitive is a worry to her. If this gets out, it could rally the people behind Anakin to see him as a savior in the future, able to bring Mandalore back to its future glory. Angry at Satine's decision to hide Anakin's abilities, Bo-Katan storms off. A few days later, the Prime Minister of Mandalore, Almec, pays Bo-Katan a visit. He mentions how Satine told him about Anakin's abilities in the Force, and hands her an old-looking box. He explains how he believes in Mandalore and its future. The box contains ancient texts written by Tar Vizsla himself, the first Mandalorian Jedi, kept in secret by the government for a time when a new Mandalorian Force user would be born. Bo-Katan thanks the governor and graciously accepts the gift. With these texts, she believes Anakin could be the future of Mandalore. She secretly gives them to Anakin, who spends years studying and learning from Tar Vizsla's texts, learning ancient Force techniques and how to combine them with Mandalorian warfare. In the years Anakin was learning the ways of the Force from Tar Vizsla, his closest friend and sister, Bo-Katan had left Clan Kryze and joined Death Watch, the ancient warrior group of Mandalorians that believed in the old ways of Mandalore and wanted to restore the planet to its former glory. This conflicted with Anakin due to his upbringing under the new Mandalorians, with his sister Satine being the leader of the pacifists. Tar Vizsla's texts also speak of Mandalore's power and potential to rule the galaxy. His teachings all oppose Satine and her pacifist ways. Anakin continues to learn the ways of war, and his views begin to differ from the new Mandalorian peace-loving family he'd grown up with. After years of studying these ancient texts, Anakin is powerful in the Force. His lightsaber ability is superior to the average Jedi, and his connection to the Force has only deepened. Tar Vizsla spoke of the light side, but also how it's important to be aware and control one's inner darkness. Death Watch is alive and strong on the moon of Concordia. Bo-Katan reveals to the leader, Pre Vizsla, that her foundling brother Anakin Skywalker is Force sensitive. Pre Vizsla wields the Darksaber and dreams of a future for Mandalore. The existence of a Force sensitive Mandalorian gives him this hope. He asks Bo-Katan to explain everything, who tells Pre that Anakin has been studying the ancient texts of Tar Vizsla, his distant relative, for years now, and will be powerful in the Force. Tar Vizsla plans to meet with Anakin and see if all the hype is worth it. Bo-Katan reaches out to Anakin for the first time in years and asks him to come meet with her on the moon. Of course, Anakin obliges and sits down with Bo-Katan. Pre Vizsla joined them and he explains to Anakin what the Death Watch is. He's worried that Anakin has had a pacifist upbringing, so bringing him onto their side might be a problem. He tells Anakin that the Death Watch represents Mandalore's true ideals. The ideals of violence, power, war, and might, not this pacifist garbage the current Duchess is spewing. Anakin stops Vizsla mid-sentence. He tells the governor that he doesn't need to convince him. He knows and understands Death Watch's ideals. He learnt them directly from his ancestor. Pre Vizsla is relieved and ecstatic. He concludes by saying he wants Anakin to lead them, with the Darksaber in hand. However, he must prove himself first. He must show them that he has the power and resolve to lead them by defeating him in a duel one-on-one. They exit the tent and head outside to the courtyard, where the rest of Death Watch has formed a circle. They knew what was about to happen. Anakin and Vizsla face off. The silence is deafening. Vizsla moves first. He uses his capture cable and goes for Anakin's legs, who elegantly jumps away. Vizsla fires upon Anakin, who easily dodges, eyes closed, using the Force. The flamethrower comes out, but Anakin parts the fire with two hands and begins advancing. Knowing his defeat is near, Vizsla pulls out the Darksaber and slashes multiple times at Anakin, but to no avail. He dodges the blade more easily than the blaster fire. On his final strike, Anakin grabs the hilt mid-air and throws Vizsla over his head as he lets go of the Darksaber to look up at Anakin, who throws his hands in the air and declares himself leader of Death Watch. History has been made. The Death Watch leaders begin coming up with a plan to overthrow Satine and her government. Anakin does have reservations towards this because Satine is his sister, but he knows it's for the greater good. Anakin has one condition with their plan. Satine will be jailed for now, but once they achieve their ultimate goal of galactic control, her regime must be implemented to maintain peace and order within the galaxy. Anakin doesn't blindly follow violence. He knows there is a time and place for peace, but only after true power has been achieved. Death Watch begins their move to take over Mandalore completely by surprise. They had no idea the Death Watch was alive and well on Concordia, and didn't have the resources to put up a sound defense. The government is overthrown, and Anakin becomes the Duke of Mandalore, with Pre Vizsla becoming the governor. They take center stage and speak to all Mandalorians throughout the city. Anakin speaks of change, to revert back to the old Mandalorian ways. The ways of war and power, the two things they were best at. Without war and battle, a Mandalorian cannot truly be happy. He concludes by saying their goal is to conquer the galaxy and take advantage of the Clone War that has been raging on for a year or so to do this. He ignites the Darksaber and cheers erupt louder than an exploding volcano. The Clone War had just begun, and Mandalorian began mandatory warrior training for both men and women. The Jedi hear about the revolution and receive a video of Anakin's speech. They are worried. They thought they had enough to deal with the Separatist crisis, but they were gravely mistaken. To begin negotiations with Mandalore to try and avoid a conflict and pointless death, they send Obi-Wan Kenobi, previously a friend of Mandalore and their people, to try and keep the peace. He arrives on the planet and is escorted to the throne room where the Death Watch is planning their war efforts. However, Anakin sensed the Jedi before he entered the room. Obi-Wan had just come to talk, but Anakin had decided something different. He would only hear what the Jedi had to say if he could hold his own in a fight with him. He ignites the Darksaber and begins walking towards Obi-Wan, who was forced to ignite his to fight back. They clash blades a few times before Anakin begins predicting Obi-Wan's moves more and more, better than a normal person should be able to. Anakin stops concealing his presence within the Force, and Obi-Wan feels this like a tsunami. Shock encompasses the Jedi, as his worst fears have been realized. Anakin ups his game, implementing the fighting style of Tar Vizsla and disarms Kenobi. He carries him out to the podium and holds him up for all people of the city to see. He decides to use the Jedi here to strengthen his people's resolve. He spews out how the Republic sent a Jedi to assassinate him before they could begin their conquest, but they failed. And to show what happens to foreign invaders, he stabs Obi-Wan through the back, ending the Jedi's life. His body is sent back to the Jedi Temple, who discuss this in a meeting with Palpatine. They decide it's necessary to meet with the leader of Mandalore on neutral grounds to discuss negotiations. Anakin leading Mandalore potentially messes up Palpatine's plans of a war between the Republic and Separatists, so deems it necessary to ascertain whether he's going to be a real problem. The meeting goes ahead, and they meet together on Kairos. They sit at a round table, Palpatine, Mace Amida, and Bail Organa, with Yoda and Mace Windu behind them. They sit opposite Anakin, Bo-Katan, and Pre Vizsla, with Death Watch warriors behind them. Anakin has to contain his laughter. Just by looking at Yoda and Mace, he knows they can sense his power in the Force. He bets they have so many questions, but their eyes give Anakin all he needs to know. He starts staring intently into Palpatine's soul, using every ounce of the Force to pry inside that man. But it's impossible. He cannot do it. He wonders if. Before Anakin can continue this thought, Palpatine starts to discuss his speech and begin negotiations, as Anakin stands up and begins to head towards the exit. He reveals he never came to talk negotiations, but wanted a chance to look the opposition leaders in the eye and size them up as he walked through the door. The Jedi Masters, Yoda and Mace, as well as Palpatine, sensed immeasurable strength in the Force within him. The Masters wonder how that strength is possible without them having sensed it. But Palpatine wears a snarl on his face, twisted in disgust. He knows why this has happened. The boy had to be around 20 years old. He was born around the same time as his former Master Plagueis succeeded in his experiments with the midichlorians to transcend life. He coughs in disgust. The boy must have been conceived by the Force to counter his master meddling with things that he should not have. His master continues to torment him even in his grave. Skywalker is a threat, and a grave one at that. He must begin scheming to make sure he doesn't mess with his perfect grand plan. Anakin and Pre Vizsla discussed what Anakin sensed. He was not impressed by the two best Jedi Masters' power in the Force. He expected more from those who have been in power for a millennia. However, Palpatine intrigued him. He could use the Force to gain insights on the Jedi Masters, but not Palpatine. The Force would not grant him that knowledge, or was something blocking it? He parked the thought for now, more pressing matters to attend to. Mandalore joined the Clone War as an independent entity. Battles with Mandalore were intense, and the Separatists and Republic tried to avoid them as much as possible. Their unconventional and unique tactics and weaponry meant they were a frightened opponent. The Mandalorian ships, often known as Mandalorian assault ships, were heavily armed and armored, sporting powerful laser cannons and shields. They were agile and maneuverable, able to dart through the battlefield with ease and outflank their enemies. The Republic ships, on the other hand, were larger and more heavily armored than the Mandalorian ships. They were equipped with massive turbo lasers, ion cannons and proton torpedoes, which they used to engage the Mandalorian ships at a range. However, they were not as maneuverable as the Mandalorian ships and relied on their superior firepower to gain the advantage. The Separatist fleet was a powerful armada, but they struggled with the Mandalorian fleet. The Separatist fleet was known for its inflexibility. It relied heavily on the centralized control of the command ships, making it vulnerable to disruptions in communication and sneak attacks, two things the Mandalorians specialized in. The fleet was also slow to react to changing conditions on the battlefield and often struggled to adjust to the spontaneity of the Mandalorian fleet. Two Sith, Maul and Savage, were envious of Anakin and the Mandalorian's power and sought to take it for themselves. They attacked Anakin and his fleet directly, each time being driven back. They would both attack together one last time, and Anakin would grant them a swift warrior's death. Anakin fought the Jedi's best during the Clone War, killing many Jedi and a few Masters. This only increases his skill and power in the Force, as the one thing he lacked was experience. At this point, he could rival the top of the Jedi Council. The Mandalorians were gaining the upper hand in the war, because all they cared about was advancing their control towards the capital. They don't need to capture a vast number of worlds to do this. They are super effective against the droids and has severely damaged the Separatist army. The Separatist fleet is no match for the Mandalorian fleet, and are easily losing the war. Palpatine is pissed off. His whole plan has been ruined and is thinking of ways he can savor it. But first, he needs Anakin dead. He sends Grievous and his invisible hand after the boy, determined to stop him in his tracks. Anakin doesn't need to leave his ship before the majority of Grievous's forces are destroyed. However, he makes a desperate effort and makes it onto Anakin's command ship, killing many Mandalorian warriors before making it to the bridge. However, their fight didn't last long. Grievous's arrogance got the better of him, and he underestimated Skywalker. He would never get the chance to get the lightsaber he so desperately wanted to add to his collection. This frustrates Palpatine even more. He thought the droid commander might stand a chance against the rebel Skywalker, but this was not the case. He was afraid to send Dooku to lose his last powerful ally. Palpatine makes the tough decision and ditches the Separatist movement to let it crumble on itself. He moves all his focus onto the Republic and needs to try and win this war, rather than playing multiple sides. Mandalore is far stronger than he could have possibly imagined. He reconfigures the war into Republic versus Mandalore. The Separatists are no more. Count Dooku goes into hiding in the industrial region of Coruscant, close by if needed. They fight the Republic's clones and Jedi head on. All-out war entails, with victories and defeats on both sides. The Mandalorians may be undermanned compared to the Republic, but their war tactics and knowledge of battle rival and even outcompete the Jedi generals in space. The Mandalorian army is advancing on the capital. The Republic forces are spread too thin, which plays right into Mandalore's hands. Palpatine cannot believe how strong their army is, spearheaded by Anakin. The Battle of Coruscant begins, a battle so legendary it will be spoken about for a millennia. The skies were lit up with laser fire and explosions as the two sides clashed. The citizens of the capital watched in fear as the brave clones defended their home. Ships were exploding left and right as they battled for control of the capital. Anakin, leading his race of warriors, was a force to be reckoned with. He'd combined his fleet with Pre-Vizsla and Bo-Katan's in one combined attack for Coruscant. His ship, a heavily armed and armored craft, weaved and dodged through the Republic's ships, taking out any that dared to stand in his way. He was relentless, determined to claim victory and prove the might of the Mandalorians to the whole galaxy. As the battle raged on, Mace Windu, one of the Order's most powerful, appeared on the scene. He flew his fighter towards Anakin's command ship, determined to end the conflict once and for all. Anakin watched as multiple Jedi fighters head towards the ship. He knew it was coming, and he was prepared. No Jedi could stop him now. He had achieved ultimate power in the Force, using both the light and dark side. Anakin's fleet picked off a few Jedi cruisers, but a couple land on their dreadnought. Anakin sends his personal guard, equipped with Beskar spears to fight them. Whilst they are preoccupied, Mace sneaks past the guard to find Anakin in his bridge, meditating with the darksaber floating in front of him. In a flash, he sends it towards Windu, who dodges at the last second. As he turns back to look at Skywalker, he's already jumping towards him, but pulls his lightsaber back. Anakin, coming from the front and his lightsaber from the back. A bold move but effective. Windu had to move out of the line of attack in order to evade, but that made him completely vulnerable to a counter. But Windu had no choice. He steps out of the line of fire as Anakin predicted this, grabs his darksaber, spins 720 degrees to slash across Windu's abdomen. Anakin had heard of Windu's Vapor, and he knew he must take him out early before his strength increased, and use this ancient dueling opening used by Tar's Vizsla himself. They begin the ground assault and focus their attack on the Jedi Temple. The Mandalorian army, thousands deep, get out in Beskar armor and weapons, equally matched for the Order. Their army, led by Anakin, penetrates the walls of the Jedi Temple. The fight is fierce and deadly. Padawans and younglings are not putting up a challenge, but the Knights and Masters are formidable opponents. However, there are just too many Mandalorians. Anakin feels a powerful presence coming towards him, a presence he has felt before. He stands up straight as he knows the little green alien is rushing towards him. So predictable, Skywalker thinks, as Yoda somersaults towards him. They clash blades frantically, echoing around the chamber like thunder and flashing like lightning. Anakin was surprised by Yoda's abilities. He and the Grand Master were equals. Had it only been the two of them, the fight could have gone either way. Anakin had already suffered a few close calls and is leaking blood from his hip and upper back. However, it wasn't only the two of them there. The Mandalorian assassins, trained in close quarter combat, equipped with Beskar spears, assisted Anakin in his duel, allowing him to end the Grand Master. It's over in Anakin's mind. They have defeated the Jedi Order, the heart of the Republic. The only thing to do now is march towards the Senate and take control. Anakin begins walking, reveling in his victory, ignoring the wounds in his back and hip, letting the blood continue to leak out. Anakin suddenly feels a rush of dark-side energy and knows something is wrong. He looks behind him to see a hooded figure ignite two red lightsabers and spin towards him whilst bellowing a menacing scream. Anakin prepares for the impact, however he knows he's not at 100% after the duel with Yoda. They begin dueling and Sidious lowers his hood to reveal Palpatine's face. It all clicks for Anakin. That's why he couldn't sense anything when they first met. He was concealing his presence in the Force. Sidious has the upper hand due to Anakin being weakened and thinks this will be an easy game. After he defeats Anakin, he can twist the narrative that he personally stopped their attack to gain favor and make himself Emperor. He blasts Anakin with Sith lightning, but Anakin stands there and shows no sign of pain. Only a moment later, the lightning is redirected to its originator, Palpatine, and burns the tips of his fingers right off. Anakin laughs as he explains to Palpatine his newly developed Mandalorian weapon. The weapon utilizes technology that harnesses electrical energy and sends it back towards the source. Technology specifically developed for a Sith Lord. Anakin knew a Sith Lord must have been hiding in the shadows throughout the whole war, and it was only a matter of time before they revealed themselves. Palpatine looked at his fingers, destroyed, and in horror, he can barely grip a lightsaber, poorly blocking Anakin's advancing strikes, and he eventually succumbs to the Darksaber. Anakin and Mandalore have won the war. Power is theirs. They begin to implement their government, to lead the Galactic Senate and bring Satine from Mandalore to do this. Anakin believes there is a time for the new Mandalorian peace regime, but only after they had power. Palpatine's theory of Anakin's creation was right. Plagueis' manipulations of the midichlorians to create life was unnatural. But what was also unnatural was the strength of the light side within the Jedi Order. Anakin was created to bring balance. The Force created a being that could destroy both the Jedi and Sith. He was so powerful because he was conceived by the Force and was able to achieve his task of bringing balance. Thanks for watching everyone. This video has been highly requested for a while, so I hope it met your expectations. If you want to support the channel, consider becoming a member or check out our Patreon. You need to watch What If Padme Was a Jedi or What If Maul Was a Jedi.